Thanks for listening to You Heard It Here. I'm your host, Haley Ziomek. Today we're exploring the world of producing and what it takes to broadcast a news show. I spoke with Jay Alpert, a writer and producer for Good Morning America. Jay has produced many different newscasts, from local news in Las Vegas and Philadelphia to national and international stories at Al Jazeera and GMA in New York. He's also a graduate of the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State. Go Devils! So Jay, I know there's a lot of different things producers have to do and be good at, and one of those is preparation. Can you talk about how you prepare for your show?
It depends on the day. I have two planning days, Wednesday and Thursday. I'll start around 9 a.m. Friday is the day when we actually really start to get the show together for Saturday. So usually 10:15 is the time that I'll start to really get on and get up to speed. We'll have a meeting shortly after that, and I'll work until about 7:15 p.m. to see what the evening shows are doing. And then I am awake at 2 a.m. on both Saturday and Sunday. So it's a really early start, and my process is to go in, see what's happened while I was sleeping overnight. We have a separate overnight senior producer who will be keeping an eye on things, see what stories need to be added to the rundown, taken out, get familiar with my rundown, take a look at the stories the correspondents have been doing, see if those need adjustments. And then as we get closer to showtime, I'll check the live shots. I'll let correspondents know what anchors are tossing to them. I'll see what they have to say for their leads and tags. And then it's rock and roll. We go on the air at 7.
But it's not always smooth sailing from there. I'd like to bring up the phrase, when news breaks, so does the rundown. Can you tell me how you deal with that in your newscast?
Absolutely. The first thing is with breaking news, you have to ask, what source is it coming from? Is it accurate? How do we tell it in a way that is appropriate? Everybody should have a goal of being first, but what's even more important than being first is being right. So the first step in breaking news is making sure that you have really good, solid information from an accurate source. And then the thing is, you have to look at, where does this belong in the scheme of our show? Just because something is breaking doesn't always necessarily mean it has to go at the top of the show. It might go after the top story.
Jay then gave me a great example of prioritizing different kinds of breaking news. He first heard about Queen Elizabeth testing positive for COVID-19 through an Associated Press alert. It was the only source with that information at the time, so he sat on it before getting confirmation from the palace itself and other journalists over there. But it still wasn't the top story.
So the thing is, in the meantime, things are so volatile in Ukraine and along the borders there. So in this case, we mentioned when the anchor said hello, they said, we just found out breaking news, Queen Elizabeth has COVID-19, more on that in a moment. But first, the situation in Ukraine, which has massive global implications. So Queen Elizabeth, it's very interesting. The viewers absolutely want to know, but really that situation in Ukraine we determined was the top story still. So making mention of it, doing our Ukraine coverage, and then we were able to go into our Queen Elizabeth coverage. And we had a report that was coming from the UK anyway. So I was able to talk to and email with our correspondent in London. And she was able to make adjustments to be prepared to talk about the Queen having COVID-19. In addition to the accuracy, you have to ask yourself as a producer, how can I get this cleanly on the show? And which means you don't want papers flying everywhere and people to be in total chaos. You want your anchors and your team to have confidence in the information they've received and their ability to deliver it.
I asked Jay if he deals with breaking news differently before the show or if he's currently in the booth running the newscast.
Before the show, you can plot a little bit more. During the show, you have to kind of on the fly. I'm fortunate that in the control room, I have an executive producer with me, and he is ultimately the one who makes that call. And we work together to figure that out. But during the show too, you have to go through that evaluation.
He then mentioned the reach that Good Morning America has and how it might look a little different across time zones.
So what you have to look at is, from the original feed of the show, do you have to replace a part of it with the updated and breaking news information? And then separately, there's, when something goes in, what comes out. So there are ways to make time for it. So again, if it's going to be a quick mention of something, this goes for both local and national news. If something is going to take up maybe 30 seconds, you have to find that somewhere else. So do you have to take out a promo? Will a tease be cut down? Do you have to put a story? Or do you have to take an additional correspondent? If that's the case, what are you taking out of the show? What are you moving around in the show? So these are all the moving parts that happen as you work to get the breaking news up.
And how do you make those decisions of what stories to cut, what to move where? Does that just come with time? Does it get easier to make those decisions?
Yeah, every situation is different. Every news organization and newsroom is different too. And over time, you get a feel for the show and you get to know and understand your show. So you think, as a producer, how would it feel if I put the story here? Is this the right spot for it, considering the context? Or is it something that's so important that it has to dominate the show or dominate the top part of the show too? So those are things that come with time, with getting to know the show. There are some days that are easier than others. There are some days where you'll find that you're able to take one thing out, put one thing in, one and done. There are other days where it's much more complex than that.
And what about the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads? Some news stations put the violent stuff up front. It's the most breaking, but others don't necessarily want to run that way. They don't want to stack the beginning of the show with all the bad stuff.
There are a lot of factors that go into that, and this is speaking from my personal perspective and experience. In some cases, that will happen. A situation will be so impactful and prominent that you have to put it high. In other situations, you may put it lower in the show. In other situations, if it bleeds, it may not have a place in the show. So it all depends on the context of the story. And it all depends on the type of newscast that's going on here.
He says you also have to think about the impact that story will have on your audience. A violent one may be better suited for an evening show instead of the morning. Understanding the market based on time of day and week versus weekend is also essential.
So for each part of the day, every show has to have its specific angles, audiences, and we have to be giving audiences something new and constantly evolving, especially in a world where people can so quickly consume news and media.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add, along these lines or going on this topic?
Yeah, I think that is also looking at how a show feels. Like we've talked about it. Sometimes not even just how does a show look on paper. How is this going to feel for the viewer? How does it feel to me if I put a certain story someplace? Does it make sense there? Is it setting the appropriate tone? Is it having the appropriate effect? Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for being on my first and probably only episode of this podcast.
Thanks. It's happy to be here. Thank you.